So I thought I'd do a quick review on a CB1000R 2022 model that I was given as a hire bike for a week or so. Um, so this is obviously a brand spanking new model. This bike only had 1,800 miles, I think, on it. It has the modern electronics, and just for reference, uh, I ride a FZ1 normally, which is the closest thing to this bike, but also Suzuki and Azuma. I've ridden a Honda Hornet and ER6, XJ6. So this is sort of my experience, and I've got a lot of experience with inline fours. Um, so yeah, this bike was interesting as it's 1,000 cc four-cylinder, but it makes this torque a lot earlier, it seems, than the FZ1 I had. I don't think it revved as high, but maybe similar, but the horsepower figures are quite the same. So with this bike, some of the observations I made was obviously the horn is flipped compared to other brands such as Yamaha and Suzuki, etc. So you're gonna probably press the horn a couple of times instead of the indicator, which is what I found myself doing quite a bit on the first ride. But within a couple of you know mistakes of pressing the horn, I realized how to signal properly on this bike. It's a bit distracting actually when you try to do that because initially you're looking at the control rather than paying attention to the road. So it's a bit annoying, but once you learn it, it's done. You don't think about it anymore. So the position on this bike is quite is interesting. I found it quite slanted forward compared to other bikes that are rode in this category. I think it's a part of their retro cafe style or whatever. Um, uh, yeah, so like because of that, they made it slightly sporty because cafe racer style, I guess. That's one of the things. Um, so it was noticeably more slanted forward. Your legs are quite bent as well, like a sports bike-esque position. Um, yeah, so that was the first sort of thing that I noticed about the bike. It feels light, so it doesn't feel heavy at all. It doesn't feel its weight, and it feels a lot more easier to manage than the FZ1. It was a lot easier to move around as well um, than my FZ1, which is weird because they're around the same sort of 220, 10 kilo sort of range. So that was a plus, and it's hard to explain, but the bike seems quite low. It doesn't seem very high up from the ground, so the weight just seems very low and therefore more manageable. Um, yeah, so that's what I noticed with the handle, or the riding position. Another strange thing was I think it's the rake of the bike. Uh, it has quite twitchy handling, and I've noticed people talking about this with the new Hornet versus the Suzuki GS X8S or whatever. So yeah, I think it's a Honda thing where they made the handling quite twitchy, and I think it's because of the rake. It feels like your handlebars directly on the wheel pointing straight down, so the slightest movement sort of make it turn and stuff. I didn't really like it that much, but it was not a problem um, overall. And the bike was really easy to ride, and I would say is much easier than the FZ1 because it doesn't feel like it wants to drop as easily as well. And the seat has a narrowing towards the front, so I'm 5'7" round, and I found this height very approachable and stuff. I didn't find it really to be troublesome to manage this bike in traffic or any other sort of situation. Um, yeah, another thing about the controls is the clutch is very light, and I think that's because this bike has a slipper clutch. Um, yeah, so it was actually genuinely shocking how light the clutch was. It was lighter than my 250 Suzuki Inazuma. I could almost like apply it with one finger. It was crazy. So it just felt very weird going from a heavy clutch to another bike with the same power with a clutch lighter than the a 250cc bike. So that was a massive positive of this. It allows you to control during slow maneuvers a lot easier. On the flip side, however, I did notice because this bike has ride by wire, it's has like a strange feel with the throttle, like slightly artificial. And this is the first ride by wire bike I've ridden. Um, and the modes seem to make it feel different as well when moving off. So it doesn't have that feature that Suzuki bikes have, the modern ones, where they increase the revs to stop the engine stalling. I don't think. Um, and yeah, so it felt very much like it was wanted to stall a lot when I was moving off, and balancing the power versus the clutch slip was a bit weird feeling on this bike. Um, so that was the one thing I found odd and not very good. It felt like the bike was hesitating during idle sometimes, like it just really wanted to stall. Um, I think putting it into sports mode weirdly improved it, and it could have just been because the throttle was became more sensitive, and therefore I was just applying more power. But that was the main like criticism I had on this bike. It was just the weird pulling away. So I couldn't really pull away fast all the time because it felt like it was gonna stall or something. And I was being very careful with it because it was a higher bike. So yeah, I didn't want to drop it. Uh, the power modes, I didn't ride with rain mode that much, but as you can guess, it just made the power a bit more tame. Regular standard mode was okay, and the sports mode actually I kind of preferred the most just because it just allowed me to. It wasn't. I didn't find it insanely twitchy, but I found I could move away faster and stuff when I was in sports mode and in the city where I ride most of the time. That's what you want to do. You want to get away from traffic, from the lights as fast as possible. Um, Not that there was an issue with the standard mode. It was just I just found the response better in sports mode. However, accelerating to motorway speeds and slip roads and things like that, sports mode was a bit choppy sometimes. Like when you hit your speed limit, 50 miles per hour, whatever, if you try to hold it, it's very like nudgy, like on and off. So you have to shift up and then, lower the gears or increase the gears. So so the engine stops being so like twitchy because the torque, whatever. Um, so that was like a strange oddity as well I found with the mapping. But yeah, as long as you're shifting, it's okay, it's tolerable. Um, the shifting was really slick, so there was no quick shifter on this model, the version I had, and but the throw of the shift lever is very short, um, like my Suzuki, unlike my FZ1, which is very long throw. And because of that, it made shifting up and down very slick and smooth. And it was smoother than my Suzuki, which are, I think, renowned for having precise gearboxes or whatever. But yeah, and what the bike actually reminded me of, weirdly, was my Honda Hornet. Um, it felt like a more powerful Honda Hornet. Obviously, because of the same brand, the sound was kind of similar, even though it's bigger engine. Everything felt quite similar. And yeah, the bike was very easy to ride, so it wasn't scary for such a powerful bike until maybe, you give it some throttle on the slip roads or whatever, then yeah, it can show you how powerful it is. But as a user-friendly bike, yeah, Honda made it very easy to ride, I would say. Um, yeah, so the stock exhaust as well, it sounds quite loud. It's pretty good for a stock exhaust. I wouldn't bother changing it, I don't think. Um, Especially when you give it a rev or a blip. When you run it for the first time when it's cold, it is quite loud as well. So it's enough to, I think, maybe annoy neighbors even for a stock exhaust. So that was a interesting observation on this. And I noticed there's no sort of X-up style exhaust valve on this bike, which is strange for 1,000 because usually they have them because they're so loud. Um, yeah, so that was another thing I noticed. Um, the brakes were fine, didn't have any issues with them. They sort of bedded in the more I rode, and yeah, they were very powerful. I didn't have any of the electronics kicking, so I couldn't tell you how good those were. I think the bike might have had auto cancelling indicators, but I'm not too sure. It just had weird times where I thought it cancelled, but because the switchgear uses this weird tactile sort of keyboard rubber dome buttons or something, it just feels odd. Like it doesn't feel like as mechanical as the old style switches. So yeah, it was a bit interesting in that regard. The color screen was fine, no issues with that either. It was straightforward fuel. I noticed the trip reset itself automatically when I refilled the bike, which was very nice. I'm pretty sure I did that automatically. Um, I'm used to doing it manually. I didn't really notice any buttons around the screen, so maybe that's the feature of it. One other annoying thing I found with the bike was the fuel tank has this line in the middle, and I don't know what it's for exactly or how Honda expect you to use their tanks, but when you're filling up, it can splash a lot of fuel out, and yeah, it's just a strange thing that Honda does for some reason. So yeah, overall, if you were looking for a powerful street bike which can do city stuff quite easily and have a lot of torque as well, um, or a lot of power, this is pretty good choice. It's quite expensive at 11,000, 11,500 or a bit more than that. Um, yeah, on the motorway, literally had no issues whatsoever. In second gear, it could do 70 plus miles per hour. Um, it has really good torque, like much better than my FZ1. Like it felt incredibly powerful, just even at city speeds and stuff. And the roll-on power is obviously there as well. It's quite cool, quite high tech. It looks nice. It's a good bike. Maybe a bit expensive, but yeah, simple, easy to ride street bike.